Fort George at Niagara-on-the-Lake, a place where thousands of British and Canadian troops did their duty, suffered hardships and lost their lives. But some linger on even today at the most haunted place in Canada. Fort George was built prior to the War of 1812 against the United States. It was built as a form of defense against any future invasion. The fort was sieged by the Americans. They almost burned the entire fort down. As a result of that, a lot of soldiers from the War of 1812 remained behind, still doing the duties they did back in 1812. Kyle Upton takes people on a ghost walk of the fort at night. And trust me, people have experiences.
Right now we are in the soldiers' barracks within the fort. This is the living quarters for the common person living within Fort George during that time. This room would be home to about 50 British soldiers. So soldiers' wives and soldiers' children would have also been found here in this room. Now this building is, in certainly my opinion, the most haunted place at Fort George. Now, of the haunted phenomena, well, you name it, we've had it here, from the standard haunting noises of footsteps when there shouldn't be footsteps, strange creaking, moaning, rapping, right through to the apparitional phenomena. Now, obviously, one of the worst things you can do to someone visiting Fort George during the day is to lock them in for the night. So the two staff that were stationed in this building on that particular day, John and Rick, I guess it was nearing the end of their day here, heading on to 5 o'clock, when they heard footsteps from the upper story of the building. So Rick stayed downstairs while John headed up there to get whoever that was up there out. Well, arriving at the top of the stairs, he looked around, and through the gloom, off in the back corner of the building, you could see the figure of a man standing there. And this gentleman was slowly making his way out towards the front of the building. So John addressed this fellow. "Excuse me, sir, we're closing up the building. If you could please follow me downstairs now." This guy just kept on walking. No nod, no eye contact. So finally, after chasing him right across the width of the building, trapping him into the front corner of the building, when Rick came up the stairs behind him, well, John paused, half turned, to tell Rick, well, there's this guy here and he's ignoring me and I'm fed up. Turned back to the corner to confront this man, only to find an empty corner. Now, most people at the fort just thought that John was crazy. He was making it up. He was a nutcase, whatever. So obviously, there's a lot of joking that John had to put up with over the next couple of weeks. So about 3 weeks later, when again John and Rick were in here, again it was close to closing. Again, footsteps were heard from the upper story. Well, this seemed like a staff practical joke. I mean, there's no way, too many coincidences. Well, John and Rick, they're not gonna let someone make idiots out of them a second time. So Rick went tearing off to the other half of the building, went up the stairs there. John headed up these stairs. Well, he got up there, looked around. No one in John's room, no one in Rick's room. That's strange, because they both heard footsteps up there. So they start chatting back and forth, of course, across the length of the building, trying to figure out whether the other guy had actually looked, in the back corner, or behind this, behind that. Well, just for an instant, they couldn't see each other. But something moved across that doorway and blocked the view of the other guy on the other stairs. Now, sadly, neither of these two gentlemen stayed around long enough to figure out what it was up there, because they were down the stairs and out of the building just as fast as they could go. But they both agreed that whatever it was that crossed that doorway, well, it had moved from the flag bastion side out towards the parade square, in the same direction as that gentleman John had seen a couple weeks earlier. Staff quickly christened the ghost of the upper story with the name of Irving, so Irving, he has remained.
When you talk about ghosts at Fort George, again, it's important to realize the way our brains are set up, we don't just see what's out there. We see what's out there plus our interpretation. We can very easily interpret all kinds of stimuli, especially ambiguous ones, as something altogether different. And especially if we're nervous, especially if we're highly suggestible.
One time, a woman and her young child were touring one of the blockhouses, and the child went off to play, and the mother was talking to the tour guide, and suddenly they turned around, and her child was having a conversation, but they couldn't see anyone there.
The mom seemed quite surprised because she didn't know that the little kid ever had an imaginary friend before.
So when the guide walked up to the child, he said, who do you see? What are you talking about? He said, there's a soldier here. He's talking to me. He's asking me, what are we doing here? He wants to get some sleep.
It was even more unusual that this little boy talking to the man at the back of the building was able to describe the uniform of the man, which matches exactly with the uniform of a British soldier that was stationed here in 1812. The officers' quarters is where the rich guys that were in command of the garrison got to stay. Now, the mirror behind me is an original mirror dating back to 1790s. But the rather unusual thing about the mirror is that a whole lot of people claim that they can see a woman in the mirror. Staff here at Fort George, visitors here at Fort George over the last 30 years have claimed to see a young lady with long, dark, curly hair.
And the other interesting thing is that the mirror is not an original piece in the fort. So therefore, it throws light on possessions actually being possessed by spirits. So a lamp, photograph, or a mirror can often end up exhibiting odd activity.
The first time I heard about it was from a little girl, could have only been about 5 or 6 years old, and she wanted to tell me about the pretty lady in the Cinderella dress that she'd seen here. Now, just recently, something has changed. These people have started reporting seeing this woman outside of the mirror. That periodically here at the fort, we have staff as well as visitors who, when approaching this building, can hear music, the pianoforte playing inside the building. Sometimes report people singing, people talking in here, only to find when they step through the door that there's no one around. Back in 1994, a woman came up to the tour guide at the end of the tour, claiming that she was a psychic and that she had a news story for the tour guide. That she watched as a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old, came down the stairs, sat down and listened for a time, sitting just behind the tour guide as he told his story. And as the tour exited from this building, this little girl followed along on the rest of the tour for about 2/3 of the remainder of the evening before disappearing. This psychic described this little girl as wearing a white shift with no shoes on and having blonde, shoulder-length hair. Now, in 1812, you wouldn't have found a soldier's daughter here in the barracks with shoulder-length hair. Hair cut short because of the bugs and the lice and such? Absolutely. Just didn't match up. But throughout 1995, we had trios of women that would report something white shape coming down the stairs, a little hand holding onto the banister. Elsewhere in the fort, sort of looking behind the tour and seeing a little girl sort of peeking from behind one of the buildings. She'd make eye contact, giggle, and then hide back behind the corner. By that point, we were telling the psychic story, as well as using her name for the ghost, Sarah Ann. This person from town said, you know, we were on a tour of one of the local cemeteries, and we're pretty sure that we saw a tombstone marked Sarah Ann. And indeed, there in St. Mark's Church, there is a tombstone marked in loving memory. Sarah Ann died July 19th, 1840, in the 7th year of her age. Is this our Sarah Ann that's buried at St. Mark's in town? I suppose we'll never know for sure. But blonde hair, shoulder length, not terribly likely for 1812, but for 1840, definitely the style.
Many people that take the tour of Fort George end up having numerous spiritual experiences while in the fort. For example, there's a tunnel area at the far end of the fort that leads to a sentry post. People have incredible experiences in this tunnel.
Fort George staff members coming down here at the end of the day to close up the tunnel and the lookout tower itself would pass somebody else dressed in historical clothing, not a member of the staff, but who they assumed would be a reenactor visiting here during the day, only to find that questioning later that nobody came out of the tunnel. So we would have numerous people that would look back upon coming into the tunnel and see a little figure, child, standing just outside the door, staring back at them. But what does a little ghost have to fear from the darkness? In the last 6 years, I guess things have changed. People on the tour have reported seeing a little girl, somewhat luminous blonde hair, wearing a white shift, joining us. Something unusual about the nature of the stories here in the tunnel is the report of figures of shadow. Not shadowy figures, as many of our ghosts are described elsewhere in Fort George, but figures of actual darkness composed of shadow, materializing and dematerializing here in the tunnel. What these things are, why they are different from the other ghosts here in Fort George, we don't know. Nor do we know what it is about the tunnel that perhaps attracts these things.
People visiting Fort George today need to come with their camera, hoping that they might pick the image of a spirit up. I think that visitors to such a fort, particularly on the ghost tour, they want to have an experience. They need to have an experience, something that they can believe that to them tells them that spirits actually exist. And this is the fort to do it in. You're guaranteed at least some experience if you're walking that fort late at night only with a lit lantern.
The Washington Avenue Grill is a favorite spot on the south side of White Rock, British Columbia. Overlooking the beach. However, it's also a place that's very haunted. A tragic story of two young lovers, a young boy and his girlfriend who had vowed to spend their lives together. Until one Valentine's Day, they were out for a walk. They kissed goodbye. And she stepped out into the street. And then was killed almost instantly when she was hit by a car. Her boyfriend was devastated. Just a few days later, nobody knew it at the time, but he committed suicide by walking out into the ocean. They didn't know until his body washed ashore a few days later. The ghosts of the unfortunate young couple are seen quite often, leaving the small cemetery adjacent to the Washington Avenue Grill. They sometimes wander right in, scaring the daylights out of the staff, who know who they are, but really aren't expecting to see them there.
One night after work, I was cleaning up, and I sat down by the window and looked out. And out of the cemetery came this dark figure of a man. And he was walking towards this building. And I was very scared. And I heard footsteps coming up the side of the building, up to the restaurant. And I was listening and looking, and there was nothing. The footsteps had stopped, and he had disappeared. And apparently, the girl had been buried 2 days before that. And I guess he had been visiting her in the restaurant. All of these things tend to happen when I'm by myself, after the restaurant is closed. I think they want to get my attention somehow. Not everyone in the restaurant sees them. So I guess they're fond of me. I don't know.
I'd heard the stories, and I'd read the back of the menu. It's an old mill. A lot of weird things have happened here. There's a graveyard just over there. But I never really put a lot of faith into it. Until the one day when it was a little bit stormy outside and I was here by myself. Went about my closing routine, and I went to the back of the restaurant, and I noticed that the lights were kind of flickering and stuff, and I thought, well, that's strange, but, you know, the power goes out a lot here, and Thought, well, you know, whatever, it's an old building. And I noticed that the lights in the bathroom were just flickering like crazy. And I thought, well, maybe that's my friends, you know, maybe somebody's playing a joke on me, so I went in to check it out. And I walked into the bathroom, I checked both of the stalls, which are along the one side. And as I turned around and I looked in the mirror, there was a reflection, and the reflection wasn't mine. And so I just ran. I ran straight down the stairs, and as I was running down the stairs, the lights were still flickering. I ran out, I closed the door. I didn't set the alarm that night. I just walked out into the parking lot, and as I was sitting in my truck and I looked up, all the lights in the whole restaurant were just going off and on and off and on. It was really scary. I didn't want to ever have that happen to me again. I quit. It's too creepy to be here by yourself.
My name's Patrick Clancy. I was a waiter here at the Washington Avenue Grill around 3 years ago. The staff and I were relaxing after work one night when we closed the restaurant down, and we were witnesses to an apparition that came and visited us one night. We were basically sitting around a table, and we heard some noises off to our right. We all turned around to see what was causing the noises. It was an apparition of a young girl. The three staff members that had been sitting with me, they got up and left because they were scared. But I sat there and watched as this apparition moved across in front of me, approximately 20 or 30 feet away, and she suddenly disappeared.
My husband and I came to dinner here, and we were sitting in the central part of the restaurant when the waiter came across, and he was giving us the specials for the evening. When a movement came into my head, something like that, and I got quite a startle. I was startled because there was nothing in the room. I turned my head, the apparition was right here. And I then realized that he must have done that to my ear. And the waiter then got all excited, and he went away and brought back a pamphlet that the Washington Avenue Grill had printed, explaining that there was a gentleman who made his appearance every now and again, and that people had seen him. I have no idea if that was him or not. I just know what I saw and what I felt. In December of last year, and we were having a Christmas party at the Washington Avenue Grill. For a period of time during that evening, an apparition, I don't know if it's the same person or not. Later on in the evening when I looked, he was gone. I didn't see him again.
One night I was closing up by myself late at night, and I saw a man walk across the room and turn around the corner. And I went to go follow him, and no one was there. He'd disappeared. The next moment, he was on the opposite end of the room, and the lights started flickering on and off, which happens a lot. Every time there's a ghost around, the lights flicker.
I'm Kim. I've been working here for about 3 years now, and I don't know that I've ever actually seen the ghost, but I've definitely felt him, like he's actually touched me. Like on this one occasion, I was here by myself late at night, closing up, and I was taking some plates into the kitchen, and I put them down, and then I went to the sink to wash my hands. And when I went to wash my hands, it was as if somebody pushed me from behind. So I turned around, but there was nobody there. But I could feel as if somebody was still standing there watching me. I just couldn't see him. On another occasion, I was in here working with, it was late at night again, and we were standing there and we heard footsteps. We knew we were the only people in the building, but there was definite footsteps, and they walked past us down the aisle, and then they walked away. And we both looked at each other, and as I said, "What was that?" As soon as I said that, somebody swept all the dishes that were off the table onto the floor, just totally cleared the table. And then it was dead silence again. Neither of us could explain what it was. These two experiences I've just spoken about were frightening. They were my first couple of experiences. And then after that, again, I would hear some other noises or the lights would flicker, things like that. But I sort of got used to it. And it just sort of became part of working here, having this ghost around.
Well, you got all the elements you need here to have a situation that's going to produce ghost experiences for people. You got a very interesting, almost romantic story of two teenagers who die close to the building. And I'm sure over time this takes on all the features of an urban legend. Probably the details themselves become changed over time. Who knows what the original story was. But nonetheless, you've got a building there where people go with the expectation that there might be something strange going on. And this sets suggestibility afoot, and of course anything that seems strange is going to be interpreted in terms of this legend, this story about the deaths. And then given what human suggestibility does, we come to interpret not necessarily strange events, but odd sounds, odd sights as signs of ghosts.
People wonder why restaurants are so haunted. One of the reasons, perhaps, is that people believe that ghosts occur when there's been a concentration of energy over a long period of time. Many people leave their energy imprints. If it's a single house, there haven't been that many people there. But in a restaurant, lots of people come and go. And inevitably, some of their energy remains behind.
Scugog and Port Perry are small, peaceful towns which hold many mysteries. The Ghost Road is one, but there are many ghosts, UFOs, and strange creatures that call this quiet area home. Scugog Island, near Port Perry, Ontario, is best known for the Ghost Road, a place where a headless motorcyclist rides down this stretch of highway every night. No one really knows who this motorcyclist is or when he died, but the story goes that in the 1960s, a man riding on a motorcycle down the 9th and 10th concession of Scugog Island lost control of his motorcycle and went off into the field and was decapitated by a barbed wire fence. And since that time, people have witnessed the light of a motorcycle traveling down the stretch of road every night. For years, people have parked on the Ghost Road on Lake Scugog to witness the sight of a headless rider. Teenagers going out to the road to park and wait, and what do they see? They see the Ghost Rider. In 1984, a couple went out to the Ghost Road when suddenly their dashboard lights went on. Then the headrest started to bang. They didn't know what to do. The wolves started to howl, and they were out of there. For years, people have tried to solve the mystery of the Ghost Road. What is this light? In 1983, a journalist and another group of people went out onto the Ghost Road. They set up two stations, one on the Ghost Road and one on another road running north and south across the lake. They set up with walkie-talkies. Suddenly they're talking away, and the Ghost Road group states,
"I can see your lights. You have your lights on."
They thought they had solved it. It was the headlights of a car.
We don't have our lights on.
Come on.
Our lights aren't on. I don't know what you're seeing.
The Scugog ghost light has a number of normal explanations. All of them have to do with the way we perceive things. So whenever you talk about light and shadow and light of a motorcycle or light of a UFO or whatever, you've got to recognize that there are all kinds of lights in our natural environment. Some of them are lights reflected off a lake at night. Some of them are lights that one sees masked by the trees. And to the imagination, these can be a motorcycle coming out of nowhere and disappearing into nowhere. If you approach a certain situation with the notion that, yes, from time to time people see a headless motorcycle rider in a motorcycle, and it's at night, obviously, and your imagination is quite open to allowing you to see this, then any kind of light from anywhere can be interpreted that way. And then one's brain fills in the details. So you may even see the outline of the motorcycle. It's not there, of course, but your brain can create that given that you believe that's what you're seeing.
People in the Scugog area have also experienced unusual lights in the sky at night. Lights that travel at rapid speeds and then disappear from view. Are they UFOs? Well, some people believe so.
I moved up to Caesarea about 1969. The fall of that year was my first incident of seeing something in the sky. One summer, I was kind of bored. I decided to take my dog for a run with my bike. The dog suddenly saw something ahead of me and took off after it. It was in the driveway of one of the cottages. The dog started barking. By this time, I had caught up to the dog, jumped off my bicycle, and started commanding the dog to get back. This object, or this thing, moved towards a bank of cedar trees. Now, instead of running up the cedar tree, like I thought it was a big cat or something like that, it stood up. And it stood up to about 3.5 feet tall, large head and long willowy arms. Now, at this point, the dog stopped, and then suddenly this sound, it was like a large thump or a large grunt, which seemed to not emanate from whatever it was just all around me. Like I felt my whole body shake. I was so petrified, I couldn't get on my bicycle. I ran pushing the bicycle down the road ahead of me, ran into the house where my parents said like what had happened. And I was shaking so bad that I couldn't even open my mouth. Anything I had read about aliens or extraterrestrial beings, they were all supposed to look like, like us. And this was long before I had ever heard the term a gray, But once I started seeing pictures and stuff and reading articles, I was going, wow, that seems a lot like what I saw that night. I don't know if these things are extraterrestrial or if they're interdimensional or whatever. All I know is I saw something very extraordinary that evening, and it had a profound effect on me in the rest of my life.
So the Scugog lights, when people see lights above a lake or they come to believe they're UFOs flying around, any light that they see that they don't immediately recognize is easily interpretable as a flying saucer. And in fact, there are all kinds of moving lights in the night sky, whether it's satellites, whether it's airplanes, whether it's searchlights. So we can easily interpret any light in the sky as an alien being.
We have a lot of interesting, strange phenomena in the community. We have a number of very significant ghost stories. One is in a house that is today called Jester's Court, which is a restaurant. The house used to be called the Murray House, and the ghost there became known as the Murray House Ghost.
Venturing into the Jester's Court, one would wonder why there's such spirit activity when it was originally a house built in 1913. There's a spirit of an elderly woman who appears on the landing as you go through the front doors. A previous owner, Nikki Bainbridge, lived on the 3rd floor of the Jester's Court.
Nikki used to be the owner of the Murray House restaurant, which was just prior to Jester's Court. She operated the restaurant downstairs, fine dining, and she lived upstairs in the upstairs quarters of the house.
Nikki had a very unusual relationship with the spirits at the Jester's Court. They not only called her name, but they would light candles for her every night. For 30 days in a row, Nikki got up every morning and went downstairs and witnessed every table lit by a candle.
People would pass by at nighttime when the restaurant was closed, and it was the wee hours of the morning, and they would say that they would see a candle burning at a particular table, and people sitting there in vintage clothing.
One night, she was awakened by this voice in her ear, calling her name. She realized something was wrong. She got up, and one of the spirits had lit a candle on a windowsill, and the candle had fallen over. The spirit saved Nikki's life.
I believe the ghost died in a fire here, because this house, as we see it now, was built on the original foundation after a fire destroyed that building. So I believe they're very wary of fire.
One time, a hotel stood on the property. There may be a relationship between the lit candles and the fire that destroyed the original hotel. We don't know if anyone died in that fire. However, we do know that the spirits are still playing with fire.
The story itself is surrounded in vagueness, as with any ghost story. You can be sure that that is a combination of their suggestibility because they've heard the story and some amount of dis-ease or discomfort or anxiety, probably late at night, perhaps with their senses dulled a little bit by alcohol. So legend plus suggestibility plus semi-darkness and misinterpretation of ambiguous stimuli. The recipe is there once again to maintain a ghost story. All sorts of irrelevant things can come to be seen as manifestations of the ghost.
There's no rhyme, no reason. They'll just, some periods, they're very active, where there'll be constant things going on. And then they'll lie low for a while, and then it's, you know, time to play games, and they'll start right back up.
The activity at the Jester's Court may continue. We have no reason why an elderly woman, a couple, and a young child are still there. If we do find out, maybe there is some possibility of sending them on their way. But right now, they're still there. For years, people have been coming to the Scugog area to enjoy the lake and scenery, but there's a new attraction now. It's called folklore, the Ghost Road, lights in the sky, haunted restaurants. That's the attraction today.
In 1912, Titanic sank. 328 victims were recovered. 209 were brought back to Halifax. Many of those recovered were laid out in the Mayflower curling rink, but the wealthy ones were laid out in the Snow's funeral home. 5 years later, even a greater disaster took place. 2 ships collided in Halifax Harbor. A Belgian relief ship, the Emile, hit a French ship, Mont Blanc, a munition ship. 25 minutes later, an explosion occurred, making it the largest man-made explosion before the atomic bomb. An estimated 2,000 people were killed instantaneously. Many of the victims were brought to Snow's funeral home. So many, in fact, that they had to be stacked outside like cordwood. Now the building is one of the most prestigious restaurants in all of Halifax, the Five Fishermen. Because they met a very violent and unexpected death, it is speculated that their spirits are still roaming through the building.
I've been working at the Five Fishermen restaurant for a number of years now. Over the past few years, there have been some strange occurrences here. For example, objects that seem to move on their own, glasses falling off the bar when they really no reason to be, nobody threw them. Faucets turning on and off in the kitchen by themselves, seemingly. One time a fork just seemed to come flying off a table on its own. That was a little creepy. And there were some other experiences that were very frightening. There was one evening I was by the salad bar, and as I was passing, I felt this just thorough chill go through me. So I was standing around looking and feeling a little confused, and the next thing I knew, something or someone reached out and slapped me across the face. I, of course, turned and looked. There was absolutely nobody in sight. I was by myself at the salad bar. I was very alarmed by this. I went to the staff, told them what happened, and they pointed out that I had a red mark on my face from where I had been slapped by nothing. And this is probably the first occurrence that I remember where this ghost or spirit actually came in physical contact with somebody in the restaurant. These incidences usually occur around closing very late at night when there's nobody else in the restaurant, just the staff. I believe there's a spirit or some sort of ghost inhabiting the restaurant.
Leonard Curry has been employed there for over 25 years and has seen and heard many unusual things.
When I first started working here at the Five Fishermen, I was responsible for setting up the salad bar. And one afternoon, in the middle of the summer, nice sunshiny day, I was setting up the salad bar. I was bringing a tray around the bar, and on one sweep by, I heard a crash.
He put down everything he was doing, turned to investigate. He saw an ashtray on the floor that had obviously been pushed. When he bent down to pick it up, he saw a reflection in the mirror.
In the mirror, I could see an old man. And I turned around to look, and he wasn't there. I looked back to the mirror, and there was nobody there.
This turned out to be one of many times employees have seen images reflected in this mirror. One evening, one of the busboys was in there working when a gentleman approached him. He assumed it was a customer's, and he struck up a conversation with him. They talked for about a minute or two.
He eventually turned away to talk to the other busboy. When he turned back, the gentleman was gone. He said to the busboy, "Where did that gentleman go?" And the other busboy said
that there was no gentleman there, he had never been there, and the busboy had been standing there talking to himself for the last couple of minutes. On another occasion, two female staff were working alone in the restaurant. One was upstairs and one was down.
Hi, my name's Kim. I've worked here for about 3 years now. One night I was working here after hours, and I swear I thought I saw someone go into the private room. So I call my friend Tina, who's working with me. And I get her to go into the room with me. We go in there, and there's no one there. Thing is, there's no way out of that room, and I swear I saw someone go in there. I really can't explain what happened that night.
So imagine a staff member at this restaurant late at night, tired, been a long day, knows that many bodies have been in this building, knows probably that there are ghost stories associated with it. Not only is that person's reality testing likely to be at a low because of fatigue and so forth, but suggestibility is likely to be at a high because it's late at night. That's when ghosts appear, we are told. It's an old building, many bodies were there, and the person becomes a bit more anxious. And that anxiety, combined with suggestibility, combined with the stories, again, perfect recipe for interpreting any kind of strange noise or light as a sign of a ghost.
The ghosts at the Five Fishermen focus their energies towards the staff before the restaurant is open or after it is closed.
My name is Michelle Ortez, and I've worked at the Five Fishermen restaurant for about a year now. I definitely think this place has an eerie presence of some sort. One night while closing the dining room, I was setting a table and I heard a knocking at the window. I looked up and saw a filmy, sort of translucent figure outside of the window. Thought I was a little overtired, maybe. It was late at night. I went back to setting a table and heard a knocking on the window again. Looked up and this filmy object was still out there. So I walked towards the window, thinking, that it might be somebody trying to do some sort of trick on us or some sort. And there was nothing there. We're on the second floor. There's no possible explanation of what it could have been. Another night while closing the dining room, I was out by the salad bar making sure that everything was done up there. I heard two voices, a man and a woman, arguing in our private room. Not very loudly, but just loud enough that I could hear them. Went over to check what it was, thinking it might have been a couple servers, talking about the evening. There was no one in there. The restaurant was completely empty at that time, and there was no one else on this floor other than myself. When these occurrences have happened to me, the first couple times it was very eerie, very scary. After a while, it's not as bad. You almost get used to it.
So this one evening, I was here and I was standing at the maitre d' stand with the maitre d'. And I thought I saw some shadowy figure go down the stairs, but then I figured it must be the lighting or something. It could not be real. And the maitre d' turns to me and says, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yes." Totally creeped me out. Well, the maitre d' and I were talking about it later, and we think maybe it's some of the ghosts that people have seen around here.
Two waitresses were carrying plates back to the kitchen. As they were walking down the hall, this image appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to be a solid image, but it glided across the floor and appeared to go through them. This startled both women.
Sometimes in the summer, when it's completely hot outside and hot inside the restaurant, you'll get a cold breeze that goes right through you and chills you. It's hard to explain because everything around you is hot, but then you're completely cold.
Another terrifying occurrence happened. A female staff member was walking through the second floor when this force, an undescribable force, slammed her up against the wall. She was held there, unable to move. She started to scream. One of the male staff members ran upstairs to see if he could help her. And then another force slammed up against him, and he fell to the floor. And then it stopped. The force disappeared. She was released from the wall. She ran from the building. Never gone to the second floor since.
The Five Fishermen restaurant in Halifax, that is quite a background. It was a funeral home. And in the time of the Halifax explosion, many of the dead were stored and prepared there. And with the sinking of the Titanic, many of the wealthier dead people were stored and prepared there. So that building would have had a lot of grief, a lot of survivors crying over their deceased loved ones. And now it's a restaurant and people see things. They see people in period costumes. It also has a well-known history in the area, so people expect to see these things. So it could be a mixture of the two things. You know, expectation, fueled by stories of friends, relatives, and the history of the place.
It's unusual how the spirit doesn't seem to want to show itself to anybody except us, those of us who are here every day.
It's as if the ghosts are playing tricks on us, you know, just trying to let us know that they're still around. And they're not here to hurt us or anything like that, though. They've become our friends.
The Five Fishermen is known for its excellent food, and for the staff who are more than willing to share their personal ghost stories.